welcome back to another episode of Talk of Fame podcast with your host, Kylie Montini. And on this episode of the podcast, we're joined by Billboard charting artist, Peyton Shay. We will discuss her new EP, being part of Billboard Charts, the inspiration behind her music, and much more coming up on the Talk of Fame podcast. Thanks so much, Peyton, for coming on the podcast. I am super excited to chat with you.
Hi everyone. Thank you first off for having me. This is such like a cool moment. I love your podcast and yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk some music stuff.
Thanks so much. And so you are currently one of the youngest female artists ever charted on the US Billboards. Like, how does it feel to kind of get like your music on the US Billboards? This is such a kind of a big moment as an artist, right?
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's super weird to like even think about, so I try not to think about it. But yeah, it's when you're like little and you get into music, I feel like one of the major things is like, oh, I want to be on stage or I want to be on the billboard. And then like sometimes when those moments happen, you're like, oh, that's interesting. All right. But also too, I think I was 14 when that happened. And I'm 19 now. So when you're 14, I feel like you don't really grasp like accomplishments or like success or anything like that. I was all about making music, releasing it. Like I didn't think of like the big picture. Um, and so when that happened, I'm like looking back on it and I was like, wow, I feel like I kind of underreacted a little. But also too, I was surrounded on obviously on that chart with names that like I've always looked up to. So it was kind of just like oh, I don't really like belong on here. Like I'm surrounded by like some of my favorite artists. So I don't really know like why I was on there. Um, but yeah, it was a really cool moment. Going into the stores and like getting the Billboard magazine and being like, oh wait, that's my name. Um, yeah, so it's definitely like one of those things where you look back on, you're like, I'm really grateful for that. That was a really cool opportunity, and I loved all the artists that like I was on the charts with. So yeah, it was a big moment.
Like for sure, it gets us like when you're 14, like you like that's when it actually happened. Like that's like when you're 14 years old, you barely kind of react. You're like, oh, that's cool, like whatever, just move along, like that's amazing. Then freak out like 2 minutes and just let it go. Like that's how I was when I was
Exactly.
like 14. I got accomplishments. I'm like, okay, that's fun. I giggle a little bit, but then like like it would just go away and just never think about it again.
Exactly. And I feel like even like we kind of do that now too. It's like you have something and you either like undermine it or you're like, all right, there's bigger names or there's like, artists that I absolutely like love and look up to. And then why am I like on there? So there's like a way that like your brain just tricks you into being like underreact, like move along, just like forget about it. Um, even like outside of music, I feel like we just all do that. So when you like stop and think about, hey, like this is where I started. This is like where I'm going. I've done this, I've done that. I think it's really like important just for like your mental health.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like I totally agree with that. Like, do you remember like what artists were like featured on the Billboard?
It was I know Pink was on it. Um, who else? It was more so like dance, like pop dance music. But Pink was she was the first CD that I ever like burned. Was So Up by Pink. Grabbed my little CD, plugged it in. And so that was just like a full circle moment because I just even like to this day, I absolutely love Pink. I love what she stands for. And so like seeing my name and then her name, I was like, whoa, like that's a cool moment. I don't know if it'll happen again, but if it did, so yeah,
Mm,
but
yeah,
probably Pink.
yeah, Pink is for sure. Like Pink is so amazing, and like her music is like kind of like so empowering to describe it. Like it's just like she is an artist that everyone should probably know her name at this point. Like everyone should listen to at least a song or two because she's just that amazing.
Exactly. And I feel like too, especially for like pop rock music and just like women in that field, like we were what, 12, 13. listening to those songs, and she was able to capture like my young teen self. Now she's able to capture like an older audience. So I feel like she's just so versatile in like who she speaks and reaches to with music, which is obviously everyone's end goal, is to, have a message that you can reach any sort of person wherever they are, whatever stage in life they're at. And
Yeah, you're totally right. And like a little while back, you just had success on your single Aftertaste after it went viral. Like, how did you kind of manage to make it go viral, or did it kind of just go viral on its own? Like, you didn't do anything.
I wouldn't say it was like mega viral, but thanks for that. Um, it was so Aftertaste was a song on my EP, and basically, of course, thanks to TikTok, I had just been like posting with it. Some songs you kind of just like never know like what's gonna do well, and that's not really like a main focus. I feel like for a lot of artists is, taking that mindset out of, oh, is this gonna do well on this platform? Like I think that kind of like hinders and blocks like creativity, and you start just like second guessing and overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I had just gone into the studio, made that song, and I was just, posting with it, and nothing was really happening. Not that I expected it to, because I also feel like when expectations are too high, that leads to disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but then I think there's a fine line of like knowing like what you're capable of and all of that. And I woke up one day and it was like 600 videos made to it, I think in like overnight. And a lot of really cool brands like Forever 21 started using it and posting with it, which was just like a wild moment because I was like, I did not expect that. And then obviously duetting that, and yeah, it just like grew from there. So I mean, there was really no tactic behind it. I didn't expect it at all. I was just posting with the song, and then really grateful for TikTok in that sense, because from there they put my song Bad and the Bad Boys and starting now on Women's History Month, with really cool artists like Leah Kate, who I absolutely love. And yeah, so just like the support from there has been really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Like TikTok is really like the key to success, I feel, because like a lot of like TikTok stars or artists really got viral or just got millions of fans just by posting on TikTok. Like there's just always a one TikTok that goes viral and gets millions of views. Like that's how Charlie D'Amelio went out. Is that like she started TikTok and then she got millions of views and then off of one TikTok and got millions of followers. Like it's like this
Yeah.
over kind of like a pandemic. So I guess it's like
Yeah.
with the pandemic, it really made people go viral, made people realize like, oh, I should do content to keep myself busy, like stuff like that. It's like TikTok is kind of like the key to creating and meeting other people across the platform.
Yeah, that's like so well said. You said it perfectly, because it's opened up such an accessibility to music and such like a different perspective, in the sense that you could be an 18-year-old living wherever, making music in your bedroom, and you have such a powerful tool in front of you that has the ability to like connect and show your music to people that um might, prior to TikTok, might have not been able to hear it. And yeah, so that's like something that I really, really love about social media, is obviously, there's the downside of comparing and just feeling like a little drained sometimes when you're constantly scrolling and everything's, your attention span's getting shorter. But then we're all able to be in these like completely separate areas and
Mhm.
somehow like still either see the same stuff that like somebody else is seeing, or feel the same way that somebody else is feeling. So it just kind of like builds this like huge community.
For sure. And like you just came out with a new EP called Better Than the Bad Boys. Like, do you think this EP is kind of similar to 2000s rock style, or like how would you like describe it? Is like when I listen to it, like it sounds like much more like a rock and roll type of similar like tunes to like old rock and roll?
Yeah, so I love like all music. I love K-pop. I love rock music. I love like just from one aisle to the other. I love it. So Better Than Bad Boys, I part of me when I go into like a session, I don't want to pull references. I don't want to um listen to too much stuff because I think sometimes then you can be, so focused on what you're hearing and trying to, recreate that it blocks out what could have, happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I love like Guns N' Roses. I love Nirvana. I love like Aerosmith. I love all of these really, really influential like music figures just as much as I love Pink, Taylor Swift, um,
Mm-hmm.
Blackpink, I love. And so I with this EP I was really centered around, all right, I'm a teenager and this is like the modern stuff that like I'm going through, but I also want to pay like respect and almost have the listener feel like you're in like a time machine a little bit to the music that I was raised on or to the music that I became, so infatuated with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like for me, it was really just about like mixing the two.
Mm-hmm. Like that's actually amazing because like with like rock and roll like or any types of music like I listen to any music like you do and stuff. I'm in like pop, country, rock and roll, anything. But it's like
Hmm.
you want to make music like your favorite artists who that are big. Like you don't
Hmm.
want to write similar, but you want to write like them. Because like of course you want to be the same person. They kind of like they did like, when you're a kid, like influence you, and you want to do the same exact thing, but not like the exact same format is probably the best way to put it. Is that like when you want to be the best artist, you probably be like well, I want to be like this person, but I know I can't. These like I have
Yeah.
their own writing style and they have their own writing styles too. So it's different things.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like that's where like inspiration pulls from. I think inspiration can be like come from within, but I think it also comes from like others around you, or
Mm-hmm.
it can come from a magazine, it can come from looking outside, it can come from your favorite artist. But it's like exactly what you said. Like you can take and pull that inspiration, but it'll never be what theirs was because you're your own person. You bring your own um twist and turns to it. So I feel like even if somebody were to like pull references or you can hear like a correlation between the song, I'm never like, oh wow, that sounds exactly like it, because it will never be exactly like it. It'll be,
Mm-hmm.
what each person brings differently to it.
Yeah, exactly. And like on the EP, like you have a song called Better Than a Bad Boys, which is the name of the EP. You have a line in the song that says rocking on then that then ice. Like why are those like kind of lyrics so important for people to hear in today's world, in our generation that it kind of involves on social media, relationships, etc. Like why do you think it's so important for people to hear?
So Bad and the Bad Boys was actually like based off a dream. Um, and it's funny because the title can be seen as like lighthearted or just like, which I love doing. I love like either like bringing in some type of like humor or just something like random into songs. Um, but it was based on a dream that I had, and I grew up in a really small town that was very like you kind of had to fit into a box, and if you were outside of that, it was like you were the laughing stock. Um, and I had, been in public school, public high school, and public middle school, and everyone was just, dressed the same, would just it's just your typical high school when you're trying to fit in as young teenagers. It's like such a scary experience and thing to go through. And I had started making music when I was 12 years old, and I was doing music videos and releasing that, and then going to school. And of course, like with the internet and with high school and doing something that, maybe other people weren't used to or weren't doing, you became the person that was like easy to pick on. Um, and yeah, I would like spend most of my time like literally in the bathroom, like begging my mom to pick me up. Because I just had a really rough time with releasing music and like not feeling the like backlash of that from older people, from younger people, from teachers, from um, all of that. And so that really affected, your self-confidence, because when you're young and you're very easily to like you're very easily like moldable. Um, and so when I was hearing certain stuff, like it kind of just like attached to me. And so I really started thinking like, all right, like, oh, this is bad. Like I'm not good. Like that. And to break out of that, it's really easy to start believing that, and it's really hard to stop believing that. Um, and so Bad and the Bad Boys was just like a song where it was like to almost to like to my younger self, where I was like, gosh, I wish I can just like go off the rails, like just go crazy. Um, and yeah, so it's a playful song, but it also has like a deeper meaning of like not of the pressure and of what bullying and all of that, what a person can handle, like to the point where it's like, what's the breaking point? And that song was kind of that for me.
Yeah, for sure. This is like when you go in like the middle school, high school years, you're like get bullied for no reason for doing what you love. Like no matter if you're a singer, songwriter, actor, YouTuber, etc. Like you will, there's always that one or two people that would judge you because they're like, oh well, you can't do singing, that's weird. But then like it's just like when if it's your passion and like you would let people get to you, that's something I dealt with as a kid also, is that like people would judge you for who you are in a way, the things you like do. But then
Mm-hmm.
you need to realize that like why do I like deal with those people? Like why did I actually let them get to me? Like I should be more than letting them get to me. I should probably be yelling at them and be like, hey, why are you yelling at me for doing what I love? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's so true, because a lot of times too, because the ones who are projecting um, insecurities or just being rude are really the ones who are like fighting their own challenges. And later on in life, like they look back on those moments and they're like, wow, like why was I like that? Why? Um, so I do believe that people can grow and change, and
Mhm.
despite despite what you do and say to people at those ages, um, I think the best thing that you can do to heal and grow from that is to like take it with a grain of salt and just, hope that they've grown, as everyone does. Like no one's perfect. Everyone um grows and everyone learns from their mistakes, but it's also like why I love bringing attention to it, because even as you grow, like those moments still stick with you. And I think it's really important to be open-minded. And if you don't like something, if you don't think something's good, or if you don't, it's not your style or your taste, just don't say anything, unless of course it's negatively affecting like viewpoints or like whatever. But it's almost better to not say anything, because words do have such a powerful like connotation and
Mhm.
bigger like meaning behind it, and it can really really impact somebody.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And like, what was like the kind of like the idea behind that EP? Like, why did you kind of decide to kind of write an EP? Like, was this like your first EP, or did you write an EP before that?
So this was my second EP. um and I love EPs. I love creating like bodies of work just as much as I love singles. But when you create like an album or an EP, you're telling a story from start to finish within X amount of songs. Um, and for me, I get really inspired to write EPs when something major or big is happening, like in my life or in those around me. Um, and at that time, I was graduating. I had, really big life decisions and life moves and all of that. And it was closing the chapter of such an important part of my life and such an important part of every kid's and every teenager's and every young adult's life, and which is kind of like the bridge of high school to stepping out of that and, really figuring out who you are as like your own person, like not attached to words or, the thoughts and feelings of others or teachers or whatever it may be. And yeah, so that's like kind of what that EP was about, was a little bit like self-discovery and the the challenges of like moving on from that.
And like, what do you like want your listeners or the people that kind of like want to listen to an album or an EP? Like, what do you want them to kind of feel when you're listening to it? Is there any like, because I know a lot of artists want like kind of like a specific kind of feeling when they want their audience to listen to their music or single or EP or whatever they release. Like, is there like a feeling you want them to feel like when they're listening to yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure we always have like a a certain story going into it that we're really trying to get across and communicate. But just as much as like my music is my story, it's also, the listener's story as well. And so I never want to create, like, I never want to set such a specific expectation to, that's what I want, or that's what I need you to feel. I love that people are open to feeling however they want with their music, but of course there's a general theme to it. And so with this EP, it was really just about like growing and almost like the growing pains of young like adulthood, and just it's something that like we all go through. And
Mhm.
um the opening track on that is Starting Now, and it was, basically just about those moments that like we've all had where whether it's 2 a.m., whatever time it is, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna get my life together, like I'm gonna do this, this, and this, and this, like I'm gonna stop feeling stressed, I'm gonna stop feeling anxious. And then it's just such a repeat cycle because you wake up and you're like, no, I'm not, like, who am I kidding? um and then it progresses into more of like, all right, like I can do this. Like Bad and the Bad Boys was just like a realization moment of like, who cares? Like, let's just, do what you want, feel how you want, like be okay with being yourself. Um, and as cliche as that sounds, that's such like a reminder that I feel like I need to tell myself all the time. Is like, I don't need to be looking at, my Instagram and nitpicking what everyone else is doing, how everyone else looks, and then so closely like comparing it. Like it's horrible that we do that. It's so mean to yourself. Um, and yeah, so that's like what I want the listener to feel when they're
Yeah.
listening to that MP.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're exactly right because like as like you're getting older and kind of turning into like a young adult, like you will often kind of nitpick the way you are and like why do I not look like this person or why do I have a social life like this person? But
Yeah,
then like you have to think to yourself like I'm not that person. Like I'm not like I might know that person, but we're still different in different ways. We might have similarities, but we're still different. And just you will often have those moments that you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna get my life together. Like this is the best moment of my life. Like tomorrow morning, I will do this or do that to make myself better as a person and get my mental health together. But then when you wake
yeah,
up, you're like, why did I say that? Like, why am I
right,
like why am I like I'm not gonna get my life together? But then that's
yeah,
like the reality of being a young adult is not like you want to do at one point, but at the other point you do not want to do that at all.
exactly. That's actually so true. It's almost like part of it is comical because like you've seen like on Instagram or like, when you're like scrolling through, um, and it's just like funny photos being like me at 2 a.m. thinking that I'm gonna like wake up at 6 a.m. and go like run a 5K. Um, And yeah, so like a part of it like is comical because it's like we randomly set these like crazy expectations that we're gonna be this like completely new version of ourselves with like no time to transition into that. Um, and again, I think that that's just like having crazy expectations. I feel like that's a big part of our society, but I also think it's like what makes us really cool and what makes people so successful in a sense is like we all have such an understanding and such a big goal of what we want to contribute to others and to society. But sometimes, at least for me, I get a little ahead of myself and I'm like, all
Mm.
right, I need to enjoy the journey, like going there.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way. So like sometimes I don't know if this is for you, but sometimes you're like, well, like I'm overreacting for no reason. Like you're like sometimes
Mm,
you're overreacting. You're like, okay, well, I got set this crazy goal that I go get done by let's just say Tuesday that you only have like a day or two things. And like it's just like how are you supposed to get this big project done by 2 days? Like how's it like
yep.
I'm the type of person I like to make big projects in amount of days because I'm a crazy kid. But I was describing myself like
Yeah.
I like to I have projects I can't handle because I'm so crazy and I don't know how
Yeah.
to think because that's like the reality of a teenager or a young adult is that like you do not know what to do in life. Like you do not
Yeah.
know how to go, and sometimes you just overreact or overthink some things that you're not supposed to.
That's so true. And I think you brought up such a great point of like, it's such a, for so many people in that age group, you really are trying to figure out like what you're doing with your life and how you're gonna get there, which is such like a big picture, like stressful topic. And I think a lot of times when people go into college, you're 18 years old and you're picking your majors and you're like, wait, is this what I want to do at 18 years old? I'm kind of making a pretty big decision that either can affect my future. Not saying that you can't deviate from that, but it's such a wild thing that we do that. But
Mhm.
I think we're getting better at like being okay with deviating from our original plan. Or at least for me, because I'm such a type A schedule person
Mhm.
that like even I think like a few years ago, like even if a grocery store wasn't like planned into my day, I'd be like, okay, now like my whole day's ruined because this wasn't planned and now I have to go, do that. So when you become so fixated on, this and this, I have to do this at this time, or I don't get da 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 da, um, it's really challenging to
Mhm.
like be okay with change coming your way.
Yeah, I'm that person too. Like when like because I like to kind of plan things ahead. Like when it's like,
Hmm.
oh, what am I doing tomorrow? I'm always like, oh, I have this and this and this. But when things come your way, I'm like, I have to go out my way and do this thing when I have a whole day
Hmm.
planned. But it's just like nerve-wracking is the best word to put it. Is that like I have this day
So
planned,
true.
but then I have to go do this project with someone.
Yep, so true, so true. But so that's why, like, when I look at people who are so like good at like going with the flow and just like taking what life throws at them and just like moving on, um, it's really interesting to watch because you kind of pick up on like, okay, how can I like implement some of that into like my life where I'm not so insanely structured that when something doesn't go how I perfectionist like brain pictured it, how to like not let that really like mess with you.
Exactly. And like what is like the most like kind of like memorial song you wrote? Like which song kind of meant the most to you, not only on the EP or any song that you wrote?
I think each song that I write is always such like a different process. I would say like memorable wise would be probably like my first song, just because I was 12 years old and I had begged my mom to get me a keyboard because I'd done musical theater like originally, just like your regular local like theater program, and I was given like such like a small role. Not saying that I deserved any bigger role because I was super, super young, did not know what I was doing. Um, and I was just given like a background role. And I was like, the next like play that I do, I want to be like, I want to have a bigger role. And I was like, okay, like how do I do that? And I was like, I need a keyboard so I can start like singing. And so I begged my mom to get me a keyboard, and she was like, you have to put it in the guest house because I'm not gonna listen to like random notes in my house. Like I'm not doing that. And I was like, deal. Um, and so I had this like little private area where I could just go and figure out how to use a keyboard, like how to write. And I ended up writing this song because at the time I'd broken up with my 12 or 13-year-old boyfriend. I was heartbroken like that. I was heartbroken after that. And so I had come home and I was like, all right, I'm gonna write like a song. And so I looked up like how to play keyboard, and then I would write in Sharpie like notes on your keyboard. And I grabbed the back of the back of an assignment. I didn't even have like a notebook or something. And I just started like looking around and I was like, an open cupboard. Okay, like how do I write that? And so I ended up writing like a 4 or 5 page song because I didn't know the structure of a song. And that was my first song. And I feel like that was really, really memorable. So it was so, looking back on it, it's so like innocent and like, I don't know, like part of you was like, oh no, I don't want to listen to that. And then another part is like, why is this so cute? Like this is cool.
I know when you like listen to old videos or like songs or something, you're like, oh, I hate this. Like, why did I post that? But then like a part of you is like, oh, I want to watch it. It's like this is younger
Hmm.
me. Like, why not see how much I've grown and see kind of how it turned out, even though I listened to it a million times.
Exactly, exactly.
And like the last thing I wanted to ask you is like, how do you find like kind of inspiration in terms of like writing music in general?
That is something that, sometimes obviously you get like writer's block and you struggle and you're like, if you don't have like during COVID, during quarantine, you weren't really out there, experiencing the ups and downs of like physical life, whether that's going to a grocery store, like whatever it is. So it kind of became a little challenging to find inspiration to write in those times. But in turning it, like I think there's so much to be said in like solitude. Um, and so I would, if I couldn't figure out something that, that I was feeling, because I feel like during that time, a lot of us were just so numb and bland to like what we were feeling and what we were experiencing, that it was almost like helpful to like look through magazines or to listen to poetry, read poetry, talk to friends, like see how they're feeling. And that like transition to even like outside COVID, even like now, if I can't, if I'm not feeling something, there's so much like story in life, like around you. I can look out my window and see somebody walking and be like, all right, like I wonder where they're going. I wonder where they are in life. I wonder if they're happy, which is like a weird can be seen as creepy because you're like, why is somebody watching me through my window, like questioning my existence? Um, but I think that's like part of storytelling is like you tell your story, you tell, your other story, but through like your lens and your eyes. Um, and yeah, so if you just keep writing and just keep going, and if you feel like something's not turning out the way you want or not, going good, just even if you know that you're going to scratch the song, there's such like a learning curve and learning growth to just continuing doing it and just finishing it. So yeah.
Yeah, there's like so like different opposites of finishing and not finishing projects. Like you'd rather finish a project and not like it than not finish it at all.
Exactly, exactly. Because even in those moments where it was bad or whatever, there's so much that can be, there's still so much that you can take away from that.
For sure. And I want to thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Of course.
I had such a blast talking to you. You're amazing. And just keep doing what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
You're doing terrific. And just I really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. And where can people follow you on social media if they want to connect with you?
First off, thank you so much for having me on. This was absolutely so much fun, and thank you to everyone listening. But you can find me on Peyton Shay on all social medias and streaming platforms. And yeah, I have new music dropping and shows. And yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Peyton, and I hope everyone's having a great rest of your day. And thanks for listening to this episode of Talk of Fame, and thanks so much again, Peyton, for coming on.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest
Bye.
of your day.